Hey guy. You're still here, still awake, still carrying the leftover noise of the day like it's a bag you forgot you were holding. Let your shoulders drop a little. Let your hands unclench. Let your breathing slow until it stops sounding like a deadline. Tonight, you're not trying to fix yourself into sleep. You're stepping into Nineveh, into wing-bull gates that watch time pass without blinking, into relief maze palaces where carved walls guide your attention the way a river guides a drifting leaf, into lion hunt courtyards where stone holds the memory of movement so vividly it almost feels warm. You picture the first breath of evening there, air cooling over the river, dust settling into quiet, the faint sweetness of date palms carried on a breeze that doesn't rush. The sky deepens like ink diluted at the edges, shifting from heat haze gold to a calmer, darker blue. Somewhere, oil lamps begin to glow, small, steady halos that soften corners and turn shadows into something intentional instead of threatening. Ahead, the gate rises. Not a simple doorway. Not a practical entrance. A statement. A threshold built to change how you walk and how you feel before you even take your first step inside. The Lamasa stands there, winged bull, human face, carved into calm authority. It isn't smiling. It isn't cruel. It just holds the line between outside and inside like it has all the time in the world. And just so we're clear, you probably won't survive this in the way you usually survive things. Not by clenching your jaw, pushing through, and calling exhaustion a personality trait. Nineveh doesn't reward that kind of hero act. It rewards the slower kind, showing up tired, admitting it quietly, and still walking forward with care. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and let me know how your day has really been, your worries, your exhaustion, or even a tiny joy that made you smile. I'm here to truly listen and offer the most sincere, heartfelt advice I can. Now turn off the lights. Take a deep, slow breath, let your tiredness melt away, and gently close your eyes. Let's drift together into tonight's dreamlike lands. And tomorrow morning, if you still remember, send me a message and tell me what you dreamed. You begin at the city's edge where the world still feels half wild. Scrubland, stubborn plants clinging to dry soil, the faint outline of trees that look like they learn patience from the wind. But as you approach, the built world gathers itself. The ground becomes more certain beneath your feet. The air starts carrying the layered scent of human life, smoke from cooking fires, crushed herbs, damp clay, wool warmed by bodies, and that faint metallic tang of tools that have been used all day. Nineveh reveals its first quiet trick. It doesn't meet you with chaos. It meets you with order. Even from a distance, you feel intention in the placement of walls and paths. The city doesn't just exist, it arranges you. It persuades your steps into a rhythm that feels steadier than whatever you were doing earlier with your day. As you near the gate, details sharpen. The Lamasa's body swells with carved muscle, heavy and grounded. The wings layer feather over feather with such deliberate repetition that your eyes start counting before your mind remembers it doesn't need to. The human face above it all is calm in a way that makes you straighten your spine without being told. You can't decide whether it's welcoming you or judging you. Maybe it's both. Maybe the city understands that safety without boundaries is just a softer kind of danger. You step closer and notice something that feels like a sly wink carved into stone, the Lamasa seems to have more legs than it should. From one angle, it stands still. From another, it steps forward. 5 legs, arranged so the creature is always moving and always steady, depending on where you stand. A built-in optical trick meant for travelers who approach from different directions, at different speeds, under different moods. The gate adapts. The guardian meets you in motion. Around you, the entrance area hums with late-day life, soft footfalls, baskets set down, a jar filled with water making a small waterfall sound. You catch the scent of dates and warm bread somewhere nearby. You hear the steady tap of metal on metal from a distance, controlled and rhythmic. People move with practiced flow, not bumping, not staring too long, not treating you like a spectacle. They adjust around you like they've done this 1,000 times, guiding without grabbing. You let that calm choreography guide your body too. Your shoulders stay closer to your frame. Your steps become more deliberate. Your gaze softens. The city is teaching you how to enter it without panic, and your tired nervous system is grateful to be taught. The stonework near the gate is lined with reliefs, rows of figures, symbols, borders that repeat like a pulse. The images don't feel like decoration. They feel like instruction. They tell you, without language, what the city values: order, continuity, the sense that everything has its place. Your modern mind wants to label it as art, history, propaganda, architecture. Your sleepy mind doesn't care about labels. It cares about the feeling. You are being placed inside something larger, and for once that larger doesn't demand you perform. It only asks you to move carefully. You pause just before the threshold, because your body senses the shift. The air under the gate is cooler, shaded, still. Sound muffles slightly, like the city is cupping your ears. You look up one more time at the Lamasa's calm face and imagine the countless people who have stood here. Brave, frightened, exhausted, hopeful, pretending they weren't tired, unable to pretend anymore. You take a slow breath. Then you step forward. Stone rises around you as you pass beneath the Lamasa's shadow, and for a moment it feels as if the wings cover you, turning dusk into a protected pocket of night. Your footsteps echo softly. The reliefs close in beside you, not threatening, just present, like a carved library you're walking through one page at a time. You can feel the palace corridors and courtyards waiting deeper inside. Those relief maze passages that will guide you through patterned stone, those lion-hung walls that will hold fierce motion in frozen lines. But right now, you're still inside the threshold moment, still in the sweet transition between the world you came from and the world that is taking you in. And something quiet happens in you as you walk. Your mind stops sprinting. It begins to walk. The Lamasa recedes behind you, still standing and stepping at once. The night opens ahead. And you continue forward, guided by stone, soothed by order, ready to let Nineveh do what it does best, slowly, patiently, beautifully rearrange the way you breathe. You carry the Lamasa's shadow with you for a few steps, the way you carry the afterimage of a bright shape when you close your eyes. Even when you're fully inside, you can still feel the gate behind you, its patience, its quiet judgment, its promise that you're allowed in as long as you move with respect. And you do. You don't rush. You let your feet learn the stone beneath them, the slight unevenness that reminds you this city is old in the way mountains are old, not fragile, not nostalgic, just established. The passage opens toward the outer streets, and Nineveh begins to show you its softer face. Not soft like weak, soft like practiced. Like a hand that knows how to guide without grabbing. The air changes again, filling with the warmer breath of daily life, bread steam, oil smoke, damp clay, sharp-cut reed. Somewhere nearby, water is poured into a jar, and the sound is a small waterfall. Somewhere else, metal taps against metal, steady and controlled, like a heartbeat you can trust. You move along a wide path that gently funnels you forward, and you start noticing how the city organizes your attention. The tallest structures stay just out of full view, teasing you with glimpses. An edge of a wall here, the corner of a massive facade there. Meanwhile, what's close stays richly detailed, doorways with carved lintels, low benches worn smooth, bundles of reeds stacked like sleeping animals. You smell crushed herbs as someone grinds them, and your mind, tired, sweetly suggestible, starts turning scent into color. Green bitter, sun gold, dust brown. The people here move with a rhythm that makes your body want to match it. You see hands that know their jobs, a woman smoothing dough with a motion so repeated it has become gentle, a man twisting rope from fibers, pulling and releasing like he's breathing with his fingers, children darting and pausing, like sparrows that forgot they're supposed to fear you. No one stares at you too long. No one acts as if you're a miracle. You're just another traveler, another pair of feet that wandered into the city's gravity. You sense, more than you're told, that there are rules here. Not rules like, don't do this or you'll be punished, but rules like, move this way and you'll be safe. The city's architecture and habit teach you without needing language. Your shoulders stay close to your body. Your steps stay measured. You keep your gaze soft, not challenging, not lost. It's a strangely comforting discipline, like finally putting your phone face down and realizing nothing catastrophic happens when you stop reacting to everything. A narrow lane branches off to the left, shadowed and tempting, but you feel the subtle pressure of others drifting you away from it. Not with force, just with presence. Someone steps into that lane, and you sense it's for locals, for people who know the shortcuts and the private rhythms. You stay on the main path. You don't need to prove anything tonight. You're not here to conquer the maze. You're here to let the maze hold you. The street widens into a small open area where vendors cluster in a loose ring, and the scene feels like a living diagram, goods arranged, bodies moving, attention flowing. Your senses wake up a little, not into stress, but into curiosity. You notice the sheen of oil on a clay lamp. You notice the matte texture of woven baskets. You notice how dyed fabric catches dusk light, deep reds, muted blues, earthy browns, like the city is wearing its own palette. A basket of dates sits near the edge of a stall, plump and wrinkled like tiny sleeping animals. You smell them, dark sweetness, almost smoky. Nearby, someone has laid out slabs of something pale and salty, maybe cheese, maybe dried fish. The scent is strong enough to make you blink, but not unpleasant. It's the smell of survival, of storing calories against uncertainty. Your modern brain wants to label everything, catalog it, turn it into content. Your tired brain, thankfully, just wants to let it be. As you drift through the crowd, you keep catching little glimpses of the palace walls beyond, higher and more severe, lined with reliefs that look like frozen motion. Those walls are the city's stern parent, watching over the chaos of children playing and people bargaining and hands working. You're moving through the part of Nineveh that breathes, where the empire becomes human-sized. There's an odd sensation that creeps in. You start to feel seen, but not in the anxious way. More like recognized. As if your tiredness is obvious, and instead of judging it, the city accommodates it. People step aside without making you feel guilty. Someone slows their pace just enough that you don't collide. A child brushes past you and then vanishes, and you realize your body didn't tense the way it usually does. You're learning the city's nervous system, and it's calmer than yours. You pass a small workshop where clay vessels are stacked in neat rows, their bellies catching the last light. The air smells damp and mineral, like rain trapped in earth. A potter's wheel sits nearby, still spinning down from recent use, the motion slow and hypnotic. You imagine the day's work, hands pressing, water flicking, the quiet satisfaction of shape emerging from formlessness. It hits you softly that this is what you've been doing all day too, trying to shape your life out of a soft mess. Except you've been doing it without water, without patience, without enough sleep. No wonder you feel cracked. Another lane brings you past bundles of reeds and mats laid out to dry. The reeds are pale and straw-colored, and they rustle with a sound like whispered paper. You think briefly about how many things in this city come from the river: water, fish, reeds, mud for bricks, trade routes, cool air at night. The river is the city's spine, and everything else is muscle and skin wrapped around it. You begin to understand that the gate was not the city's true entrance. The gate was the symbolic threshold, the dramatic one, the one meant to impress. This slow walk through ordinary life, is the real entry. This is where Nineveh takes you gently by the wrist and says, without words, if you want to understand me, start here. Start with bread. Start with baskets. Start with hands. And as you keep walking, dusk deepens into night. Lamps begin to glow, small ovals of light that make the shadows feel intentional rather than threatening. The air cools a little more. Your breath becomes visible only in sensation, not in mist. The city's sounds soften, turning from daytime bustle into evening murmur. You feel yourself drifting into a steadier state, as if your mind has finally stopped sprinting and has accepted the pace of your feet. The palace walls ahead remain half hidden, waiting, but you're not impatient. You can wait. You can walk. You can be guided. For once, you don't need to know the whole route. You just need to keep moving forward, through the city's careful, human warmth, toward whatever the relief maze wants to show you next. The lamps grow more frequent as you move, like the city is sprinkling little stars along your path so you don't forget where the ground is. The light is warm and imperfect, oil flame light that trembles, stretches shadows, and makes every carved edge look alive for half a second. You keep walking toward the gate's inner throat, and you realize you've only stepped under the lamasa once. You've been near it, beneath it, beside it, but now you're truly entering the part where stone becomes a ceiling and the city decides, very politely, to surround you. The winged bulls loom again, closer than before, and your body reacts the way it does in a museum when you round a corner and find something enormous you didn't expect. Your breath catches, then smooths. Your footsteps slow. Your eyes lift. It's not fear, exactly. It's the awareness of scale, and the awareness that scale is a kind of persuasion. Up close, The lamase's surface is not smooth perfection. It carries the grain of the stone, tiny scars, faint tool marks that feel like fingerprints left by the past. The muscles are still impossibly confident, but the confidence is made of labor. You can imagine the rhythm of chisels, the sound of strikes, the patient clearing of dust. You can imagine the way the carver's shoulder might have ached at night, and how they might have rubbed it, and then come back the next day anyway, because this wasn't just a job. This was a statement meant to last longer than any one tired body. You pass beneath the creature's belly, and the air shifts into a deeper shade. It's cooler here, and the sound changes too. The outside noise muffles, as if you've stepped into a carved cave. Your own movement becomes loud in your ears, the soft scuff of your feet, the faint brush of your clothing. It's strangely intimate, like the city wants you to hear yourself for a moment before it lets you hear anything else. The walls beside you are lined with reliefs, and they begin to work on you immediately. You don't even have time to decide whether you care. The images pull your attention the way a moving river pulls a floating leaf, gently, inevitably. Rows of figures, animals, symbols, borders. Repetition and variation. Patterns that feel like language even when you don't understand the words. You lean closer without realizing it, as if your body wants to read the stone with its eyes the way you read your phone with your thumb. Except this is slower, heavier, and somehow more honest. The reliefs are carved with a precision that makes you feel as though someone once stood exactly where you stand now and thought, yes, this is where the viewer will be. This is where the story must catch them. And it does catch you. The figures in the reliefs move forward in processions, and your brain starts doing what it always does, looking for narrative. Who is important? Who is carrying what? Why does this symbol repeat? Where are they going? You don't get clear answers, but you get a sensation, an impression of order, power, ritual, and the quiet satisfaction of being part of something structured. It's almost funny, the way your modern mind tries to translate it into familiar categories. You want to call it propaganda. You want to call it art. You want to call it history. But the reliefs don't care what you call them. They exist to do their job, to make you feel the empire as you pass through it, to wrap you in its story like a cloak you didn't ask for but suddenly find warm. As you walk, you notice the borders, those carved frames around scenes, repeating rosettes and geometric patterns that serve as both decoration and containment. Even the art has boundaries here. Even the beauty knows where it ends. Your exhausted brain approves of that. It has been living too long in endlessness, endless notifications, endless tasks, endless thought loops at 2 a.m. Here, at least, the stone says, this scene ends here. This motif repeats here. This corridor leads there. The world is allowed to have edges. You brush your fingers near the wall, not touching, just close enough to feel the cool radiating off the stone. The texture looks almost soft in the lamplight, but you know it's hard, unyielding. And yet, it yields in one way. It yields meaning. It yields the sensation of being guided. The gate passage narrows slightly, and you feel yourself funneled forward. Your body responds by becoming smaller, shoulders tuck, steps stay centered, arms close. You move like someone who has learned, even in one night, that a great city is like a great animal. You don't flail inside it. You move with care. You let it sense you are not a threat. And then the strangest thing happens. you begin to feel as if the walls are not just showing you something, but noticing you. It's subtle. It's not mystical lightning. It's more like the way you feel when you walk into a room full of people mid-conversation and the tone changes slightly, even if no one turns their head. The reliefs are fixed, yes, but the act of passing them changes you. You become, for a few minutes, part of their intended audience. You become the person the gate was built to shape. And because of that, you feel as if the stone is checking whether it worked. You wonder what it sees in you. A traveler, certainly. A tired one, definitely. Someone carrying a modern kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from walking long distances or hauling water, but from thinking too much and resting too little. Someone who has learned to be alert in the wrong ways, alert to email, to deadlines, to small invisible pressures. Here, that kind of alertness is useless. The gate doesn't care about your calendar. It cares about your posture. It cares about your pace. It cares about whether you respect threshold spaces. So you adjust. You breathe slower. You let your gaze soften. You stop trying to decode every symbol and instead allow the overall flow to wash over you. And the reliefs reward you, not with answers, but with calm. You notice more when you stop forcing meaning. A curved line that suggests a garment's fold. A carved braid. The way an animal's eye is just a little deeper, giving it shadowed life. The craftsmanship becomes a lullaby in stone, repetition, detail, repetition, detail. Halfway through, the Lamase's presence shifts above you again, and you glance up at the curve of its wing. The feathers stack in rows, each one a small, deliberate shape, and your mind, sweetly sleepy now, begins to match its breathing to the pattern. In, out, feather, feather. In, out. The city is teaching you how to be here without panic. Somewhere beyond the passage, you sense openness, an inner space, maybe a broader street, maybe the first true glimpse of Palace Mass. The air ahead feels less compressed. The sound changes again, a faint echo of movement, distant footfalls, the soft clink of something being set down. You're nearing the end of this threshold tunnel, nearing the moment where you will emerge fully into Nineveh's interior. Before you step out, you take one more slow look along the reliefs. You notice how the figures never seem rushed. Even when they depict movement, the movement is controlled. Even when they depict power, the power is composed. The message is not frenzy. The message is certainty. And you think, quietly, with that gentle sarcasm that keeps you sane, that if your life had a Lamasa gate, it would probably carve you with 5 legs too, because you're always trying to be standing and walking at the same time. Always trying to rest and work simultaneously. Always trying to be calm while moving forward. It's ridiculous. It's also very human. You step toward the passage's end, and the lamplight behind you feels warmer now, like you've been held in the gate's palm for a moment, and it's reluctant to let you go. But it does let you go, because that's what thresholds do. They don't keep you. They change you just enough and then release you into what comes next. You emerge, and the city opens a little wider in front of you, streets leading deeper, walls rising higher, the promise of palaces waiting like a slow carved maze. The Lamasa recedes behind you, still watching, still stepping, still standing. And you continue steadier now, as if the gate has taught your nervous system a new language, not hurry, not fight, but deliberate motion through immense beauty. The city's interior doesn't greet you with a single grand reveal. It does something more interesting, and frankly, more manipulative, in the best way. It gives you fragments. A wall face here, a carved corner there, a corridor that seems to bend just out of sight. It makes you earn the full picture by walking it into existence step by step, like a dream that only loads its scenery when you keep moving. You follow a broad route that narrows into an intentional passageway, and suddenly the architecture shifts from city to palace thinking. The stones feel more dressed, the angles more deliberate, the surfaces more eager to carry meaning. The lamplight clings to the carvings as if it knows this is where it belongs. Your footsteps sound different too, less absorbed by dust and open air, more echoed by hard plains and enclosed spaces. You can tell you've crossed another invisible line, from the living, breathing outer rhythms into the designed interior where power lives and art does overtime. The relief maze begins with a corridor that looks straight forward for 3 steps and then quietly proves it isn't. The walls run long, the perspective compresses, and the far end seems closer than it should. Carved bands line the stone at eye level and above, framed by borders that repeat like a steady pulse. Even before you try to read anything, your brain starts to. It can't help itself. Humans are meaning machines, and these walls are feeding yours like a patient hand feeding a tired child. Here, take this pattern. Here, take this sequence. Here, follow this. You let your gaze travel along the reliefs, and the corridor becomes a kind of slow-moving scroll. Figures repeat. Motifs return. Certain symbols cluster near thresholds. Others appear in long runs that feel like, keep going. Your body begins to respond as if the wall is giving you directions, not in words but in rhythm. A rosette appears, then another, then a third. Your mind tags it as a marker. Not because you know what it means, but because it repeats in a way that suggests intention. Then the rosettes fade into a different motif, a band of interlocking shapes, like braided rope and stone. Your attention softens, and you feel the corridor's mood shift with it. The palace is not just decorated, it's tuned. The further you go, the more you realize how the walls guide without guiding. There are no arrows, no helpful modern signage, no bright, friendly, "You are here." Instead, there's flow. There's the way scenes cluster near doorways, how certain carvings draw your eye toward an opening, how the composition of figures subtly leans you in one direction. You've walked through museums that tried to do this with floor decals and audio guides. Nineveh does it with stone and psychology, and it's annoyingly good at it. You pass a series of panels where movement seems to sweep forward, processions that advance in a shared direction, and your body follows that direction without question. You round a gentle corner, and the reliefs change their energy. The figures become larger. The borders thicken. The scene feels more important, more central. You sense you're being drawn inward, deeper into the palace's heart, the way water is drawn toward a lower place. And then the maze shows you its first little trick, 2 corridors that look nearly identical. They both carry relief bands. They both curve into shadow. They both offer that tempting sense of, this is the way. Your tired brain wants to pick randomly just to keep momentum. But your body, trained now by la masse of patience, slows. You look not hurriedly, but carefully. You compare the motifs like you're matching fabric patterns in low light. One corridor begins with rosettes. The other begins with a repeated animal form, small, stylized, almost like a signature. That difference feels like a whisper, "Choose me." You choose the rosettes, because they feel familiar, and familiar is a kind of safety when you're half asleep in a palace maze that could swallow your sense of direction. You move into the corridor, and the air cools again, the stone holding the day's heat and releasing it slowly, like a giant palm exhaling. The lamplight flickers along the reliefs, and the figures seem to shift in peripheral vision, never enough to be frightening, just enough to keep your brain engaged. You start to understand that this is how the palace keeps you awake while also lulling you. It balances detail and repetition. It gives you enough novelty to prevent boredom, enough pattern to prevent stress. It's architecture as nervous system management, and if you weren't so sleepy you'd probably be offended that ancient stones are better at calming you than your own coping mechanisms. As you walk, you notice how the palace corridors are not purely straight. They're subtly angled, slightly bending, as if the builders knew that a perfectly straight line would encourage speed. Curves encourage slowing down. Curves encourage looking. Curves encourage the sense of being led rather than marching. The palace doesn't want you to sprint through it. It wants you to absorb it. It wants your attention to become part of the space. Somewhere nearby, you hear the softest brush of movement, someone passing behind a wall, footsteps muted by distance. You don't chase the sound. You don't call out. You simply accept that the palace has inhabitants the way a forest does, present, unseen, moving through their own routes. You're a guest in their patterns, and you're behaving like one. The reliefs begin to feel more like a language you can almost read. Not literally, but emotionally. Panels of calm, orderly scenes seem to occur where corridors widen or where doorways open. Busier, denser carvings appear where the path narrows, as if to hold your attention close so you don't drift into a wrong turn. You find yourself trusting the walls in a way you didn't expect. You start to believe that if you keep moving with care, the palace will keep you from getting lost, at least for now. Your fingertips itch again to reach out, to touch the stone. You resist, not out of fear, but out of respect. The urge itself is enough. The urge proves you're present. The urge proves the carvings are doing what they were designed to do, pulling you toward them, making you want to be close, making you want to belong to the story. A corridor opens into a small transitional space, a kind of breathing pocket between passages. The ceiling feels higher here. The air circulates. You smell something faintly herbal, maybe from a nearby storeroom where bundles of dried plants hang. The light pools on the floor, and for a moment you feel as if you've stepped into the center of a carved thought. From here, the palace offers you another choice, but this one feels less like a trick and more like an invitation. One path leads toward a brighter area, an openness you can sense, a courtyard perhaps. The other leads deeper into shadow, into more tightly packed reliefs, more enclosed corridors. Your body leans toward the brighter route, because you are human and light is comfort. But the shadowed route has a pull too, the lure of mystery, the promise of something hidden. You stand there, listening to your own breath, feeling the stone's coolness in the air. You think about how often you choose routes in life based on urgency instead of intuition. You think about how rarely you let yourself pause at a fork without panicking. Here, in this ancient palace, you get to practice a different kind of choice. You look again at the reliefs nearest the branching. The panels near the brighter path show open scenes, space, movement, perhaps a hint of animals, perhaps a suggestion of hunting or sport. The panels near the shadowed path show denser, more formal processions, more symbols, more repeated patterns that feel like official space. The brighter path feels like breath. The shadowed path feels like gravity. You choose breath. Not because you're avoiding depth, but because you know you'll go deep soon enough. You know the palace will draw you inward again. For now, you let it guide you toward a place where the night sky might be visible above walls, where it might move more freely, where stone might meet moonlight. You take the first steps toward that opening, and the relief maze continues beside you, still whispering directions in pattern and repetition. You feel the palace's presence behind your eyes like a slow, steady pulse. And you realize you're no longer just walking through corridors. You're being taught how to move through complexity without rushing, how to follow beauty without getting lost, how to let a carved world lead your tired mind into something calmer. The corridor releases you the way a careful hand releases a bird, not with a sudden fling, but with a gradual loosening until you realize you're free. The air changes first. Less stone-cooled, more open, stirred by a faint breeze that smells like dust and something faintly vegetal. Then the light changes too. The lamplight's warm tremble meets a softer, broader glow from above, and you lift your eyes and find yourself beneath a rectangle of sky. You've reached a courtyard. It's not a cozy courtyard. Not a small domestic square with laundry lines and laughter tucked into corners. This is a palace courtyard, meant to impress, meant to be remembered, meant to carry sound and ceremony. The walls rise high and steady around you, dressed in carved reliefs that wrap the space like a continuous story. The ground is firm beneath your feet, and the openness above feels like the courtyard is breathing, inhaling night air and exhaling it back into the palace. And there, spread across the walls in carved sequences that make your eyes travel in long, slow arcs, are the lion hunt scenes. At first glance, it's almost too much. The reliefs are dense with motion, lions mid-leap, lions recoiling, lions twisting as if the stone itself is trying to remember the snap of muscle and the flare of fur. Human figures appear too, but the lions steal your attention the way a real predator would. Your body goes a little more alert, not in fear, but in respect. Something in you recognizes the shape of danger, even in art, even in history. Even in a sleepy bedtime walk through a city that keeps pretending it's only beauty. You step closer, and the lamplight makes the carved surfaces shimmer. Shadows deepen in the grooves. Highlights catch on raised lines. A lion's shoulder becomes a small mountain. A mane becomes a wave. An eye becomes a dark pool. It's unnerving how alive it feels, as if the wall is not flat but moving, breathing the hunt back into the night. You notice the way the courtyard is designed for this. The reliefs sit at a height that meets your gaze and then lifts it. The sequences stretch long enough that your eyes can't take them all in at once, forcing you to walk if you want the full story. And the light, whether from oil lamps now or from sun in the day, plays across the carvings in a way that changes them hour by hour. In the afternoon, the lions would look different. At dawn, different. Here, at night, they become creatures of shadow and flicker, half revealed and half imagined. You realize slowly that this is not just art. It's staging. It's theater carved into permanence. In a lion hunt, the point is not only the kill. The point is the display of control, over animals, over fear, over chaos. The point is to show that power can step into a courtyard, into a contained space, and turn wildness into spectacle. The lions are not just lions, they are the physical form of danger, made manageable. And the palace wants you to feel that management in your bones. But you also sense the honesty tucked into the carving. The lions are not depicted as pathetic. They are strong. They are fierce. They are beautiful in the way danger often is. Whoever carved this did not hate the lions. They respected them enough to give them full weight and full dignity. The drama isn't cheap. It's earned. You pace along the wall slowly, letting the sequence unfold. A lion's paws stretch forward, claws suggested by shallow lines. Another lion turns its head, mouth open, and you can almost hear a roar that never comes. The stone captures the moment just before impact, the split second where everything is tension and possibility. Your tired mind, which has been carrying its own tensions all day, recognizes that sensation. It's familiar, that feeling of being on the edge of something, waiting for the outcome. And it dawns on you, quietly, with a little inward chuckle, that your modern life has its own lion hunts. Meetings that feel like arenas. Deadlines that stalk. Emails that pounce at the worst time. You've been living in a constant hunt without a courtyard to contain it, without walls to frame it, without a clear beginning and end. No wonder your nervous system feels like a lion that never gets to lie down. Here, at least, the hunt is framed. It has borders. It has a story arc. It begins, it intensifies, it resolves. Even if the reliefs show conflict, the very act of carving them into a courtyard makes them manageable. It's danger made narratable. It's fear given a sequence. You tilt your head and notice how the courtyard itself supports that idea. The open sky above suggests the world's vastness, but the walls around you insist on control. You are in an open space that is still contained. You are under the night, but still within structure. It's a paradox that feels oddly soothing, freedom inside boundaries, breath inside walls. The light shifts as a breeze stirs the lamps. For a moment, shadows slide across a lion's face, making its expression change, from fierce to pain to calm, all in the space of a flicker. You blink slowly, and your eyes feel heavy. This is the kind of motion you can watch when you're falling asleep. Not fast, not demanding, just a slow dance of light and shadow on carved muscle. You notice, too, how the courtyard invites people to gather, not in a crowded crush, but in arranged presence. The space is wide enough to hold ceremonies, wide enough for processions to turn, wide enough for important bodies to stand and be seen. You can imagine the day scenes, sunlight pouring down, the reliefs blazing with clarity, the courtyard filled with orderly movement. At night, it becomes quieter, more private, like you've stumbled into the palace's memory rather than its performance. You drift to the center of the courtyard and look up. The sky is a deep, dark bowl with a few faint stars. The walls rise around you like cliffs. For a moment, you feel very small, and then, strangely, you feel very safe. The courtyard scale is intimidating, yes, but it's also protective. It holds you. It gives your mind something larger than your worries to orbit. You return to the wall and let your gaze settle on a particular lion, one captured mid-stride, body elongated, muscles carved with such care that you can almost feel the weight of each step. The lion's energy is forward, determined. And you realize that's what the palace wants you to borrow: forward motion without franticness, strength without chaos, the ability to face danger while still looking composed. You don't need to become an emperor. You don't need to win a hunt. You just need to learn the courtyard's lesson. That fear can be framed, that tension can be turned into story, that the mind can be guided through conflict and out the other side. You take one last slow walk along the lion hunt sequence, letting the relief sink into you like a lullaby carved from adrenaline. Then you turn your body toward the next opening, a passageway leading back into the palace's interior, where workshops and quiet work and the city's hidden mechanics wait behind the grand walls. The courtyard stays behind you, still breathing under the open sky, its lions forever moving in stone. And you carry their lesson with you as you step back into the relief maze. Not everything that looks fierce has to be fought right now. Sometimes it only needs to be witnessed, understood, and then gently left behind. Leaving the courtyard feels like stepping out of a held breath. The open sky narrows into stone again, and the palace's corridors take you back with that calm insistence. No shove, no urgency, just the steady suggestion of, this way. The lion hunt scenes fade behind you, but their energy lingers in your body like a remembered drumbeat. You're still aware of strength, of tension, of framed danger. But now the palace shifts your attention towards something quieter, something almost tender in its mundanity. You follow a passage that slopes gently downward, and the air becomes warmer, thicker with the smell of work. Not the sharp scent of fresh-cut stone, but the lived-in scent of human hands, clay dust, reed fiber, ink, oil, wool. The sound changes too, less echo, more muffled activity. A soft scrape. A faint tap. The rustle of materials being handled. It's the sound of a place where things are made and maintained, where glory is supported by chores. The corridor opens into a side complex that feels less ceremonial and more practical, like the palace has taken off its heavy crown for a moment, and is willing to show you the scalp underneath. The walls here are still solid, still carved in places, but the carvings are not the main performance. The main performance is labor. You pass a space where clay tablets are stacked in careful piles, each one small enough to fit in two hands. They look unassuming, little rectangles of earth, but you can feel their importance humming faintly, like a quiet engine. This is the city's memory system. Not the dreamy, carved memory of lions and lamassu, but the administrative memory, lists, accounts, notes, decisions, the daily proof that an empire didn't run on speeches alone. You imagine scribes here, people whose lives are built from patience and precision. Hands stained with ink, eyes trained to catch tiny errors, posture shaped by hours of leaning over clay. The kind of work that would make your modern wrists ache just thinking about it. Your brain, which spent the day juggling digital tasks, suddenly feels a weird kinship. Different tools, same pressure. Do it correctly, do it consistently, because people depend on it. Near the tablets, you notice small cylindrical objects, seals, maybe, carved with miniature patterns. Their surfaces catch lamplight like tiny moons. You realize, with sleepy awe, that a seal is a kind of signature, a condensed identity. Instead of writing a name, you press a story into clay. A symbol says, "This belongs to me, this is approved, this is official." It's surprisingly intimate. Even an empire needs personal marks. Even power needs a way to say, quietly, I was here. You drift deeper, and the space narrows into corridors lined with storerooms. In one doorway, bundles of reeds stand upright like a forest tamed into order. In another, coils of rope hang from pegs, each coil a promise of holding something together. You smell leather, warm, animal, slightly sharp, mixed with the sweeter scent of oil. Your mind starts building an invisible inventory: lamps, jars, baskets, textiles, tools. It's like the palace is showing you its pantry, and you realize that behind every grand courtyard is a ridiculous amount of stuff someone has to manage. A sweeping motion catches your attention, someone moving a broom across the floor, gathering dust into neat lines. The sound is soft, repetitive, almost soothing. You feel a small flicker of appreciation, because it's the kind of work that rarely gets carved into reliefs. No one makes a dramatic wall panel titled, "The Heroic Sweeper of Corridor 7." And yet, without sweeping, the palace becomes a mess. Without cleaning, the sacred becomes sticky. Without maintenance, the grand becomes embarrassing. You feel the palace's humility here. It's not sentimental humility. It's practical humility. Even Nineveh knows that if you don't keep the floors clean, the lion hunt courtyard becomes a hazard, and someone important will trip, and then power will have to pretend it meant to fall that way. No one wants that. You move through another passage and find yourself near a low table covered with small tools. A stylus rests there, simple, sharp, purposeful. A vessel of water sits nearby, and a cloth for wiping. Everything is arranged with a kind of quiet respect. You can almost sense the rhythm of work: soften the clay, press the signs, check the lines, set the tablet aside. Repeat. 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 It's repetitive in a way that could be crushing if you hate it, but meditative if you accept it. You feel your eyelids grow heavier just imagining the steady motion. The palace has been teaching you all night, but the lesson here is different. The gate taught you thresholds. The relief maze taught you navigation through pattern. The courtyard taught you framing danger into story. This place teaches you something that modern life keeps trying to delete: that greatness is mostly built from small tasks done well. You notice how the workers, seen only in passing, felt more than watched, move with efficiency that isn't hurried. No frantic gestures. No dramatic flourishes. Just a calm competence. It makes you think of how often you rush through your own small tasks, not because they need rushing, but because you're trying to outrun a feeling. Here, you can't outrun anything. The palace will still be here. The stone doesn't care about your speed. The work gets done at the pace it requires. A faint scent of ink grows stronger, and you follow it around the corner into a narrower room where the air feels cooler. Ink, dark, mineral, sharp, mingles with the scent of damp clay. You imagine someone mixing it carefully, balancing thickness and flow. You imagine the way a mistake would matter: a wrong mark, a miscounted bundle, a missed delivery. The Empire's muscles are made of lions and lamassu, yes, but the Empire's bones are made of records. And suddenly, you feel the quiet weight of responsibility that must have lived in these rooms. Not glamorous responsibility. The kind that doesn't get applauded. The kind that sits on your shoulders and says, gently and relentlessly, be accurate. Be consistent. Don't get sloppy because you're tired. People will feel the ripple of your errors. That lands somewhere tender in you, because you've been tired lately. tired enough to cut corners, tired enough to miss small things, tired enough to want the world to accept. Good enough. And it often does. But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes there's a consequence. Sometimes the consequence is just your own guilt, the quiet ache of knowing you didn't show up fully. You let that thought pass through you without clinging. This isn't a night for self-punishment. Nineveh isn't inviting you to spiral. It's inviting you to witness, to learn, to be gentler with yourself while still honoring the value of careful work. You move on, following corridors that feel less ornate but more real. You pass storage niches with jars lined up like silent sentries. You pass bundles of cloth folded with care, edges straight, colors muted in lamplight. You pass tools arranged in ways that tell you someone knows where everything belongs. And you feel, in your tired bones, the strange comfort of order. The palace behind the palace is not flashy. It doesn't need to be. It's the part that keeps everything from collapsing. It's the layer of quiet labor beneath the layer of carved glory. And as you walk through it, you start to feel a new kind of admiration, one that isn't dazzled, just respectful. You leave the workspaces slowly, carrying the scent of ink and clay in your mind. The relief maze waits ahead again, ready to guide you toward kitchens, gardens, and softer human comforts. But now, when you think of Nineveh, you don't only think of winged bulls and lion hunts. You think of hands pressing signs into clay. You think of sweepers gathering dust. You think of the invisible people who made sure the palace could keep telling its story. And maybe, just maybe, you let that idea settle into you like a quiet promise, that your own small, careful efforts matter more than your exhausted brain usually admits. The work corridors release you back toward warmer air, and you feel it before you see it, the scent of bread, the softened hush of greenery nearby, the way sound changes when it passes through leaves instead of stone. After ink and clay and careful accounting, the palace offers you something almost kindly domestic. Not small, not simple, but human in a way that makes your chest loosen. You follow the drift of warmth and end up near a cluster of spaces that feel like the palace's stomach and lungs. Kitchens, storerooms, courtyard gardens tucked into protected corners. The architecture here is still strong, still deliberate, but it is designed for living rather than impressing. The walls don't posture as much. The passageways widen where people need to carry trays or jars. Doorways are positioned to catch breezes, not just to frame ceremonies. It's the kind of design that says, someone actually thought about comfort here. A low, steady heat radiates from somewhere close, an oven or hearth, and the air smells like grain and smoke and oil. Your mouth does that embarrassing thing it does when it remembers food exists. Your stomach, which has been politely silent while you stared at La Massa lions, suddenly clears its throat like, "Hello, yes, excuse me, we are also part of this pilgrimage." You drift nearer to the source of the smell and find a shaded area where bread is cooling, flat rounds stacked on woven mats, surfaces browned and slightly blistered. The sight is so ordinary it feels miraculous. History often shows you crowns and hunts and gates. It forgets to show you bread. But bread is what makes gates possible. Bread is what keeps scribes upright and sweepers moving and lion hunts staged. Bread is the quiet foundation of everything grand. You breathe in the scent and feel your nervous system respond in a way you can't intellectualize. Your body understands food as safety, The smell wraps around you like a blanket. You don't even need to eat to feel soothed, just being near it is enough. Nearby, bundles of herbs hang to dry, thin stems, small leaves tied with twine. Some smell sharp and green, others sweet, others medicinal in that bitter, honest way. You imagine them being crushed into sauces, brewed into calming teas, rubbed into oil. You imagine someone deciding, with practical love, this will help the stomach, this will help the head, this will help the skin. The palace may be an empire stage, but it also contains the small intelligence of care. You step into a garden pocket where the air is cooler. It's not a wild garden, it's arranged, purposeful, protected by walls that block harsh winds and hold warmth at night. Small trees or shrubs cluster in corners, leaves catching lamplight in soft flashes. The ground smells damp, darker than the dusty outer streets. You hear water, maybe a jar being filled, maybe a trickle from a channel, quiet enough that it feels like the garden is whispering to itself. You pause here, under leaves and shadow, and your body does something it rarely gets permission to do. It stops moving without panicking. You don't have to justify the pause. You don't have to label it rest, like it's a productivity hack. You simply stand and let the courtyard garden hold you. The stone walls around the plants create a calm enclosure. The leaves soften the air. The faint water sound gives your mind something to rest against. It's like the palace is letting you borrow a slower heartbeat. You become aware of how hospitality works here. It isn't sentimental. It's structural. It's built into the placement of shade, the direction of airflow, the proximity of food to workspaces. It's not just, people are nice. It's, the environment is designed to make people last. The empire wants its people functional, yes, but function requires care. Even power knows that bodies need water, that minds need pauses, that hands need warmth to keep working. You think about how your modern world treats hospitality as decoration, throw pillows, scented candles, a polite smile. Here, hospitality is closer to engineering. It's the difference between a space that looks pretty and a space that actually supports life. A clay jar sits nearby, its rounded belly dark against the ground. The air around it feels cooler, and you sense it holds water that has been kept from the day's heat. You don't reach for it, but you imagine the sensation, the first sip, the coolness spreading through the throat, the relief in the body. Your own throat feels dry suddenly, as if your mind's imagination is enough to trigger need. You swallow and breathe, and the air itself feels more drinkable here. The garden's quiet brings back the lion hunt courtyard in a strange way. That courtyard framed danger into spectacle. This garden frames calm into something intentional. Both are forms of control. Both are ways the palace manages emotion. One by displaying power, the other by providing rest. And you, sleepy traveler that you are, feel grateful for the balance. You walk slowly along the garden edge and notice small details. A woven basket with fruit, maybe dates again, maybe figs. The faint stickiness of sweetness in the air. A small cluster of stones arranged to keep soil in place. The way the lamplight makes leaf shadows dance on the wall like quiet handwriting. It's all so gentle that your eyelids grow heavier, and you let them. For a moment you imagine what it would be like to live here, not as an emperor, not as a hunter, not as someone carved into reliefs, but as someone who works and eats and rests. Someone who knows which herbs calm which aches, someone who knows the oven's moods, someone who knows that the garden's shade is a daily gift. The thought is strangely comforting. It reminds you that history isn't only made of dramatic moments. It's made of routines. Your mind, which usually tries to turn everything into analysis, goes quiet. You just feel warmth from bread, coolness from shade, softness from leaves, steadiness from stone. You realize how hungry you are for steadiness, not just physical, but emotional. Not the rigid steadiness of control-freak perfection, but the simple steadiness of knowing there is food, there is water, there is shade, and you are allowed to exist without performing. Eventually, the palace's corridors call you back, not loudly, not sharply, more like a gentle tug on your sleeve. You sense that deeper spaces await, that the relief maze will continue, that more of Nineveh's carved logic will unfold. But you don't leave the garden abruptly. You leave slowly, letting the calm cling to you the way flour clings to hands. As you step back toward the corridor, you carry a small, quiet callback in your mind, bread steam and garden shade. You suspect you'll need that later, when the maze grows more confusing, when your tired brain starts searching for a reason to panic. You file it away like a secret tool. If you start to drift into stress, remember the bread. Remember the leaves. Remember that even in an empire, someone built a place to rest. And then you move on, gentle-footed, into the stone passages again, fed, soothed, steadier, ready for the palace to deepen its slow, beautiful spell. You step back into stone, and the bread and garden softness follows you like a scent caught in your hair. The corridor seems familiar for the first few turns, rosettes here, braided borders there, processions leaning you forward with their carved momentum. You tell yourself you've learned the palace's language now. You tell yourself you can read the walls the way you read a map. And for a few minutes, that's almost true. Then the labyrinth tightens its grip, not by becoming threatening, but by becoming similar. The next corridor looks like the previous corridor's cousin. Same proportions. Same lamp niches. Same repeating band of shapes at eye level. Even the air feels copied, cool stone, faint oil smoke, a soft undertone of dust. You pass one junction, then another, and you start to notice how the palace uses repetition the way lullabies do. It soothes you into surrender. Your tired brain likes that surrender. It wants to sink into pattern and drift. But another part of you, still carrying the Lamasse's quiet warning, stays alert enough to feel the subtle shift. The repetition isn't only soothing. It's also disorienting. It's the palace reminding you that you are not the one in control here. You are being guided, yes. But guidance can also be a kind of gentle steering away from certainty. You walk past a relief panel where figures advance in a neat line, and you think, automatically keep going. The panel's flow is forward. The corridor follows. Your feet obey. You turn a corner and meet the same kind of panel again, and your mind says, yes, this is the route. Familiar means correct. But the longer you rely on familiar, the more the palace begins to slip sideways. A corridor opens into a slightly wider pocket, a breathing space like the one before, and for a moment you expect to smell herbs again, expect the soft relief of leaves. Instead, you smell only stone and oil, and the pocket is emptier. No domestic warmth, no garden hush. The light is dimmer, the ceiling feels higher, and the reliefs here are denser, more formal. It's as if you stepped into the palace's more serious mood without noticing the transition. You pause, not dramatically, just enough to let your body recalibrate. Your breath makes a small sound in the quiet, and you become aware that your footsteps have been the only constant. You tilt your head and listen for anything familiar: water, bread, the muted human busyness from earlier. Nothing. Only distant, indistinct movement that could be anywhere. It's fine, you tell yourself. Palaces are big. Big things take time. You're just deeper now. And yet you feel the first little prick of uncertainty, the kind that, in your modern life, usually triggers frantic checking. You'd grab your phone. You'd refresh a map. You'd demand instant reassurance. Here, there's only stone and pattern, and neither one is going to flash a helpful notification that says, "You are slightly lost, but it's okay." So you do the only thing available. You look at the walls again. You search for your familiar markers. Rosettes. Braided bands. The sequence that felt like, "Keep going." You find them, which should calm you, but instead it makes your uncertainty sharper. Because the rosettes are here too. The braided bands are here too. The processions flow in this direction too. The palace is not short on reassurance. It's overflowing with it, so much that it starts to feel less like reassurance and more like camouflage. You walk on, choosing a corridor that seems to match the one you came from. It bends gently, then bends again. The turns are not abrupt, they're persuasive. Each one feels like it's correcting your course, like it's doing you a favor. And you let it, because your body is tired, and tired bodies accept favors. You pass a lamp niche with a particular chip in the stone edge, an irregularity you register without trying. 10 steps later, you pass a lamp niche with a similar chip. You tell yourself stone repeats, damage repeats, your brain is being dramatic. But then, another turn, another niche, another chip. The same kind of imperfection, in the same kind of place. Your mouth almost forms a sound of complaint, but you swallow it. There is no audience here for your frustration, and besides, the palace isn't being cruel. It's being itself. You are the one assuming you should be able to master it quickly. You slow down. You let your steps shorten. You let your gaze widen to include not just the reliefs, but the floor, the corners, the way the light sits in the corridor. You look for differences that aren't carved. Tiny things. Dust patterns. Scuffs. The direction shadows lean. For a moment you think you see it, an opening ahead that feels familiar, like the passage back toward the lion hunt courtyard. Your body leans toward it with relief. Light seems slightly broader there, air slightly freer. You move toward it, and then you realize the reliefs along this route are wrong for that destination. The panels are too formal, too dense, too official. The courtyard's path had more openness in its carvings, more breath. This is gravity, not breath. You stop again, and this time your uncertainty feels like a small animal moving in your chest, restless, not dangerous, but persistent. It wants a resolution. It wants a label. It wants you to pick a direction and commit with confidence, because that's how your brain tries to feel safe. But you remember the garden's shade. You remember bread's steam. You remember that the palace has already taught you another option: pause without panic. Let the moment be unclear without turning it into a catastrophe. So you stand there and simply breathe. The air is cool on your nostrils. The lamplight flickers. Your heartbeat slows to match it. In that slower rhythm, you begin to notice something you missed while chasing certainty. The reliefs aren't only repeating motifs. They're shifting in subtle sequence. A rosette appears, yes, but its border changes. The braided band repeats, yes, but the braid's direction reverses. Small differences. Like a lullaby sung with slight variations so the listener doesn't fully fall asleep. The palace is not lost in repetition. It's layering it. You start walking again, but now you treat each corridor like a sentence you're reading carefully rather than skimming. You notice one panel where a figure's posture leans slightly inward toward a doorway. Another where a carved border thickens near a turn. Another where the density of pattern increases just before a narrowing. These are the palace's cues, not the obvious repeating symbols, but the subtle changes around them. Even with that attention, you can't shake the feeling that you've been turned around. Not drastically. Not, I have no idea where I am. More like the slow realization that north has quietly become south while you weren't watching. You look back over your shoulder, and the corridor behind you seems to stretch in a way that feels unfamiliar. Too long, too straight, too calm. It doesn't match the path you remember taking. It matches something else. A sleepy, gentle irony settles over you. You came here to be guided, and the guidance is working so well it has guided you away from your own sense of direction. Your fingers brush your side absently, checking that the small things you carry are still with you, not because anything is missing, but because uncertainty makes the body crave reassurance. Everything feels present. For now. You nod to yourself, as if that solves something. You keep moving, and the palace keeps offering you corridors that are nearly right, almost correct, familiar enough to be tempting. You feel the maze's intelligence, not hostile, just patient, like it knows you will eventually make a mistake, because everyone does. It's not waiting to punish you. It's waiting to teach you. And somewhere ahead, in the dim, repeating beauty of stone and pattern, you sense the next lesson forming, something small and practical that will force you to test whether you can stay calm when you don't have perfect certainty. You walk toward it, slower now, more attentive, carrying the garden's softness like a hidden charm, while the relief maze quietly rearranges the world around you. The palace doesn't announce the moment you drift from mildly unsure into slightly complicated. It never does. Complications don't arrive with trumpets. They arrive the way dust arrives, quietly, gradually, until you notice it on your skin. You keep moving through corridors that feel like variations on a theme: stone, lamp niches, relief bands repeating in their careful loops. Your attention is sharper now, but your body is still tired, and tired bodies make small, ordinary mistakes. You pass a narrow opening, angle your shoulders, adjust your pace to slip by a corner where the wall juts out. Your hand brushes your side again, not even consciously, the way you check your pocket when you're walking through a crowd. And this time, your fingers don't find what they expect. It's a small sensation first, a blank space where a familiar object should be. Your brain resists it for a second, because denial is a surprisingly fast reflex. You check again. Same result. You feel the shape of your clothing, the seam, the fold, the place where you've been carrying a small token. Something you were given earlier without ceremony, a simple marker that matters more than it looks like it should. Maybe it's a seal impression on a bit of clay. Maybe it's a small chord or beat used to signal you've been allowed through certain passages without being questioned. Maybe it's just a tiny stamped piece of material, official enough to matter, humble enough to be easily overlooked. Whatever form it takes, it's the kind of object that says quietly, "You belong here right now. You are permitted." And now it isn't against your side anymore. Your first instinct is the modern one, the internal flare of panic that wants to turn your body into a frantic machine. Check everything. Search fast. Blame yourself. Imagine consequences. Your heart gives a small thump, like it wants to start sprinting without you. But the palace has been training you all night. Threshold patience. Pattern reading. Courtyard framing, garden softness, quiet labor. And you use those lessons now like tools you didn't realize you'd been collecting. You stop. Not dramatically. Not with a gasp. You simply stop walking and let your body become still. Your breath comes in, then out. You count nothing. You don't scold yourself. You let the panic crest and then slide off like water off stone. You check the obvious places carefully, without shaking yourself like a desperate animal. You pat the fold of your garment. You run your hand along the seam. You feel for the weight that should be there. Nothing. The absence is real. All right, you think gently, with a little sarcasm that keeps you from turning this into a personal tragedy. Congratulations. You have officially become a person in a historical setting who loses the one small thing that proves they're allowed to be there. You don't know what the consequence would be, exactly, because you're not here to be arrested or threatened. That's not the mood of this story. But you sense that without the token, certain doors may not open as smoothly. Certain guides may hesitate. Certain routes may become awkward. In a palace built on order, a missing marker is like a missing stitch, small, but it can unravel comfort quickly if ignored. So you decide to retrieve it. And here is the real problem. You are in a relief maze where corridors repeat like lullabies, and you are no longer fully certain of your last turns. You let that sit in your mind without fighting it. You don't demand clarity. You don't try to rewrite the last 10 minutes perfectly. You do something slower and smarter. You reconstruct the path the way a careful scribe reconstructs a record, by sequence, by markers, by what you can actually verify. You look around the corridor where you stand. The reliefs here are dense, formal. The lamp niches are evenly spaced. The floor has a slight slope. You remember passing a breathing pocket not long ago, an open space with higher ceiling and cooler air. You remember a corner where the wall jutted out and you had to angle your shoulders. That might have been where the token snagged and slipped free. That corner is now your best clue. So you turn back. Your steps are quiet and measured. You keep your eyes low enough to watch the floor, because small objects don't float at eye level. They hide in shadows, nestle against dust, tuck themselves into cracks like shy insects. The lamplight is not harsh. It doesn't reveal everything. It asks you to be patient. As you walk, you resist the urge to rush. Rushing makes you miss things. Rushing makes you breathe shallowly. Rushing makes the palace feel like a trap. You refuse that narrative. This is not a trap. This is a lesson in attention. You reach a corner and pause to scan the ground. You see nothing. You continue. Another corner. Another scan. Your eyes start to adjust to the low light in a new way, picking up subtle differences in texture. A pebble here, a darker patch of dust there, a faint scraped mark where something heavy was dragged earlier. You pass a relief panel that feels familiar, one with a particular border variation, the braid reversing direction. You file it as a breadcrumb. You move on. You find the breathing pocket again, the small open space with higher ceiling. The air here is cooler, and you recognize it with a quiet relief that has nothing to do with the token and everything to do with orientation. You are not lost in the dramatic sense. You are in a maze, yes, but you can still find your way by attention. You scan the pocket floor carefully. Still nothing. You keep retracing. At each junction, the palace offers you the same challenge, corridors that look nearly identical. And now you notice how your mind wants to cheat. It wants to say, "We've been here," even when you're not sure. It wants to snap decisions into place just to relieve uncertainty. You don't let it. You treat each junction like a fresh moment of care. You look for subtle clues, relief density, border thickness, the way light sits at the turn. You realize halfway through that this is what the palace was preparing you for. The repetition wasn't just to impress you or soothe you. It was to force you into a different kind of awareness. Not the anxious awareness of scanning for danger, but the calm awareness of noticing detail. It's the difference between paranoia and attention. One burns you out. The other steadies you. You reach the jutted corner you remembered, the place where you angled your shoulders. And there, on the floor beside the stone, you see a tiny shape that doesn't belong to the dust. It's small. It's easy to miss. It catches a sliver of lamplight and gives it back in a dull gleam. Your body relaxes before your mind fully registers it. That's how relief works. It arrives as a soft unnodding. You crouch slowly, and the floor feels cooler near your knees. You reach for the object with care, as if quick movement might scare it away. Your fingers close around it, and you feel its weight, light but real. The texture is slightly rough, perhaps clay, perhaps stamped material, perhaps a small bead threaded on cord. Whatever it is, it feels like permission made physical. You hold it for a moment before putting it back where it belongs. Not because you're sentimental, but because you understand now that this tiny token is not just an object. It's a symbol of the whole night's lesson. Small things matter. Attention matters. Calm matters. And if you lose something, you don't have to punish yourself into panic. You can simply turn around, retrace, and retrieve. You secure the token carefully, tucking it into a safer fold, pressing it gently into place. You check once, twice. It stays. Your fingers linger there for a heartbeat longer, like a parent making sure a child's shoe is tied. Then you straighten and look ahead. Now you have another choice. You could continue retracing all the way back to where you first felt uncertain, returning to familiar spaces like the lion hunt courtyard or the garden's shade. Or you could accept that the palace has taught you what it needed to teach in this moment, and move forward again, only now with steadier attention, with your permission token secured, with a deeper trust in your ability to stay calm inside complexity. You breathe in slowly. You breathe out. And you choose to move forward, not to prove anything, but because the night is still unfolding, and Nineveh still has more to show you, carved patiently into stone and shadow. With the token secure against your side again, your body feels as if it has regained a missing bone. The palace doesn't change. Stone is still stone, reliefs still repeat, but your internal weather shifts. The small panic cloud dissolves. Your shoulders drop. Your breath deepens. It's almost ridiculous that such a tiny object could matter so much, and yet your whole nervous system seems to nod in agreement. Yes, we like our permissions where we can feel them. You continue forward, choosing a corridor that slopes gently upward, and the air cools in a way that suggests you're rising toward open space again. The lamp niches become slightly farther apart, the shadows longer. You sense distance around you, not vast but breathable. Then the corridor opens onto a terrace-like passage where one side is lower, and you can feel the outside night pressing in through gaps or openings. The river's presence arrives before you see it, carried on wind, a faint dampness, a clean, cool note that cuts through oil, smoke, and dust. You follow that coolness the way a sleepy animal follows water. Along this passage, you notice movement that feels different from the palace's internal hush. Not workroom bustle, not kitchen warmth, but the steady, watchful rhythm of people whose job is to keep things smooth. Night watch. Keepers of thresholds. Bodies that move through shadow with practiced patience. You don't stare. You don't demand attention. You simply sense them the way you sense a lighthouse even when you're not looking directly at it, present, oriented, reliable. Their presence changes the atmosphere. It turns the corridor from maze into managed space. You feel safer, not because anyone is dramatic about it, but because the night here is held by routine. The terrace passage runs along a wall that rises high on your right, reliefs still carved in bands but less dense, as if this route prioritizes movement over storytelling. On your left, the space opens into a darker void that suggests an outer edge of the palace complex. You can't see far. Night is still night, but you can feel the openness in the way the air moves. The breeze slides along your skin and cools the heat you didn't realize you were carrying. You walk slowly, letting the wind comb through your thoughts. It's not a strong wind. It's a steady one, a river breath that smells faintly of wet earth and distant plant life. The city's sounds change here too. Deeper away from kitchens and workshops, you hear more of the night itself. A distant call of an animal, the soft scrape of sandals, the clink of something metal being adjusted, the occasional low murmur of activity that never resolves into words. You don't need words. You only need tone. And the tone is calm. As you move, you realize the palace has offered you another kind of guidance tonight. Not only walls and motifs, but people who keep the space coherent. They don't grab your arm. They don't point dramatically. They simply drift in ways that suggest direction, walking certain routes more often, pausing at certain corners, occupying certain thresholds. Their bodies become living signage. This way is used, that way is private, that corner is watched, this passage leads outward. You follow the used route because your body recognizes it as safe. It's the same instinct you had earlier in the market streets. How people moved around you without pushing. How they nudged you away from narrow lanes without needing to say anything. Nineveh is full of silent guidance. It's almost as if the city believes words are too clumsy for something as delicate as moving tired humans through stone. You pass a point where the terrace widens, and you catch a partial view of the city beyond. Dark shapes of structures, faint scattered lamplight like ground-level stars, and far off, the suggestion of the river's line. The sight doesn't feel like a panorama meant for tourists. It feels like a practical glance. Yes, this is where you are in relation to the water, the walls, the night. The breeze strengthens for a moment, and you pull your arms closer to your body. The coolness is pleasant, but it reminds you how much you've been walking. Your legs feel heavier now, not in pain, but in that slow fatigue that settles in when adrenaline is gone. You realize, with a soft inward laugh, that you've been doing a very long historical tour on the fuel of lamplight and wonder. No coffee. No energy drink. Just carved lions and bread steam. Your modern self would be impressed and mildly offended. You keep moving, and the night watch presence remains in the periphery, never intrusive, always steady. You sense that if you drift toward a wrong corridor, the flow of bodies would subtly correct you. Not with confrontation, but with the quiet physics of human traffic. You are being held inside a system that knows its own routes. The palace's relief bands return more densely as you approach another set of openings. This junction feels important, the kind where you could either slip back into labyrinthine interior passages or continue toward outer routes with more air. You slow, letting your eyes sweep the walls, looking for the subtle cues you've been learning: border thickness, motif changes, density near turns. A rosette appears at the edge of one corridor, framed differently than before, its petals sharper, its border thicker. It feels like a marker. Another corridor carries braided bands that reverse direction. Another shows a procession leaning inward. You don't understand the content, but you understand the function. The walls are offering you options with different emotional weights. You want, at this moment, not more gravity, but more breath. The river wind has reminded you how soothing openness can be. So you choose the corridor that seems to angle slightly outward, where the air feels less trapped and the reliefs are less ceremonial. You step into it, and the breeze follows you, a quiet companion slipping past stone. As you walk, you realize something else. The small problem with the token didn't only teach you attention. It also gave you a gentle confidence. You're no longer treating the palace like a puzzle you have to solve perfectly. You're treating it like a place you can move through with care and trust. If you make a mistake, you can retrace. If you feel uncertain, you can pause. If you need orientation, you can follow wind and human rhythm. The corridor curves, and a faint new scent enters, cooler still, mixed with the distant smell of water and perhaps the soft dampness of river reeds. You can almost hear the river in your imagination, steady, indifferent, carrying the night forward whether you are ready or not. You pass another figure in the periphery, a watchful presence adjusting their pace so you can pass without collision. The movement is subtle, almost elegant. You feel again that you are being guided without being handled. It's the kind of help that doesn't make you feel small. It makes you feel safe. You continue along the cooler passage, letting the river wind brush your face and loosen the last tight knots in your chest. The palace behind you remains carved and complex, but ahead the routes feel clearer, not because the architecture has simplified, but because your mind has. And somewhere in that calmer clarity, you sense the next step of the night forming, a deeper reading of the walls themselves, a way to turn art into direction so you can move with confidence through whatever the maze offers next. The river wind stays with you like a quiet hand at your back, and for the first time in a while, you feel oriented, not by knowing every corridor, but by knowing how to settle inside not knowing. That's a strange kind of competence, and it makes you walk differently. Your steps become smoother. Your gaze becomes less frantic, more curious. You stop treating each junction like a test and start treating it like a sentence, something you can read slowly, with context. The palace rewards that shift. You reach a long gallery-like corridor where the reliefs are laid out in broader panels, less cramped than before, as if the builders expected people to linger here. The lamp niches are placed in a way that washes light across the carvings, not just the floor. It's almost comically considerate, like the palace is saying, yes, yes, I know you're tired, but I also know you'll understand faster if I show you properly. You drift along the wall and begin to notice that the reliefs aren't random scenes stitched together for decoration. They're arranged, sequenced, structured like a path in visual form. The more you stare, the more the sequence starts to behave like a map that uses story instead of arrows. You see a procession, figures moving in an orderly line, their bodies angled in a shared direction. They carry objects that repeat, vessels, bundles, staffs, symbols. The figures are carved in a way that creates flow, and your eyes follow that flow automatically. You realize that where the procession walks on the wall, the corridor often walks in the same direction. The relief is a visual current, and the architecture rides it. You test the idea, quietly, like a sleepy scientist. You reach a corner where the corridor could turn left or right. On the wall nearest the left turn, the procession's bodies lean left. Their feet point left. The carved border thickens near the left edge as if emphasizing that direction. On the wall nearest the right turn, the figures look more static, less directional, framed with heavier borders that feel like containment rather than invitation. Your body wants the left turn, because the relief is already taking you there. You turn left. The corridor continues smoothly, and you feel a small pulse of satisfaction, not pride, not victory, just the calm relief of alignment. The palace's language is beginning to become legible, not in words but in movement cues. As you walk, you start noticing threshold markers. Certain motifs cluster around doorways, rosettes repeated more tightly, border patterns that thicken, symbols that appear like punctuation. Some doorways have reliefs that feel open, less dense, more breathable, as if the scene is inviting you to pass through. Others have reliefs that feel sealed, dense patterns, double borders, heavier framing, as if they're telling you, this is important, enter only if you mean it. You don't need anyone to explain it. Your nervous system reads it the way it reads facial expressions. Thin borders feel permissive. Thick borders feel formal. Open compositions feel like paths. Dense compositions feel like rooms of authority. You pass a doorway framed by repeated rosettes, and you feel the same sensation you felt under the lamassu, threshold energy. Your pace slows. Your breath deepens. You recognize that the palace uses repetition to mark significance. It's a way of saying, pay attention here. Don't drift. Don't stumble through this like it's nothing. Beyond the doorway, the corridor shifts again. The reliefs change content. Instead of processions, you see sequences of animals, some calm, some tense, arranged in a rhythm that suggests progression. You notice how the animal's orientation changes. When they face forward, the corridor tends to continue. When they face inward toward the wall edge, a turn is near. It's subtle, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. like learning a new word and suddenly noticing it everywhere. Your tired mind feels a soft thrill, the kind that isn't sharp enough to wake you fully but is bright enough to keep you engaged. It's the perfect bedtime curiosity, gentle, slow, satisfying. You keep testing the logic. A corridor splits. You look at the relief nearest each branch. One branch begins with a motif you've started associating with official spaces, denser patterns, more formal framing, less directional flow. The other branch begins with a lighter band, and the figures lean forward, creating motion. You choose the motion branch, and again the palace seems to agree. You start to understand why this works. In a place like Nineveh, walls weren't only surfaces, they were communication. People moved through these spaces regularly, officials, workers, guests, each needing to know where to go without being lost. Not everyone could rely on spoken directions, not everyone would be guided personally. The walls became a silent system of cues. Art wasn't separate from function. Art was function, dressed in beauty. You run your eyes along a panel that depicts a repeating symbol, perhaps a sacred emblem, perhaps a stylized tree, perhaps a star-like shape. It appears at intervals, always near what feels like important junctions. It's like a recurring landmark. A visual. You are near a key point. You store it in your mind as a breadcrumb. When you see that symbol, slow down and choose carefully. The river wind brushes in faintly through a distant opening, and you notice that the palace's cue system isn't only visual. It uses air, light, sound. Corridors that lead outward feel cooler. Corridors that lead inward feel still. Spaces that lead to courtyards have a different echo. It's as if the palace is a whole-body map, and you've been trying to navigate it with only your eyes. Now you're using everything. You reach another junction, and instead of feeling that prick of uncertainty, you feel a calm curiosity. You look at the reliefs like a reader looking at punctuation. You notice the border thickening near the right edge, punctuation that suggests a turn. You notice the procession leaning right. You notice a threshold motif clustering near the right opening. The choice becomes almost obvious. You turn right, and your body relaxes as soon as you commit. That's another lesson, tucked quietly into this moment. Certainty doesn't always come before movement. Sometimes movement creates certainty. The palace doesn't want you to freeze at every fork. It wants you to choose, then flow. As you continue, the reliefs begin to pull you back toward what feels like a familiar destination. The compositions become more open. The patterns that once accompanied the lion hunt courtyard start appearing again. Lighter borders, breathier sequences, a faint hint of animal motion. Your memory stirs. You can almost taste the open sky again, the way the courtyard breathed. You can almost feel that flickering lamplight on carved fur. You let yourself smile, inwardly, because you've been here long enough now to have landmarks in your mind. Not modern landmarks, no street signs, no glowing map, but sensory landmarks, bread steam, garden shade, river wind, La Massa shadow, lion hunt stone. And now, reliefs are becoming one more landmark, a carved guidebook you can read with sleepy patience. You keep moving, letting the wall's visual logic lead you, and you realize how deeply soothing it is to have direction without noise. No instructions shouted. No buzzing alerts. Just stone telling you quietly, this way. This threshold. This turn. This breathing space ahead. In your modern life, you are constantly being guided by things that want your attention for profit. Here, you are guided by art that wants your attention for meaning. It's a different kind of persuasion, and it feels almost clean. You follow the relief sequence onward, and the palace begins to open again, drawing you closer to a space you recognize, where the lion hunt courtyard waits with its open sky and its carved, frozen motion. Only now, you're not arriving as someone dazzled and lost. You're arriving as someone who can read the path carved into the walls. And that, quietly, gently, feels like belonging. The corridor's air begins to widen before you see the opening, and your body recognizes it like a memory in the lungs. The stone stops pressing so close. The echo changes. The reliefs loosen their density, giving your eyes more breathe between scenes. And then the palace releases you again into that familiar rectangle of night sky. The lion hunt courtyard. It feels different this time, not because the courtyard changed, but because you did. The first time, you arrived in awe, caught by the sheer vividness of carved danger. Now you arrive with steadier attention, like someone returning to a painting after learning how to actually look. You step into the open space and let the cool air settle over you, the river wind faintly present even here, diluted but still a quiet companion. The lamps around the courtyard flicker as if they're breathing, and the reliefs along the walls respond immediately. Shadows slide across lion bodies. Highlights cling to raised lines. The hunt seems to move again, not as a threat, but as a demonstration of how light can animate stone. You walk slowly along the perimeter, and it feels like walking alongside a frozen river of motion. You find the panel you stared at earlier, the lion mid-stride, muscles elongated, a forward drive that made your body feel steadier. You look again, and now you notice the details you missed the first time. The way the carved fur is suggested not by individual hairs but by rhythmic grooves. The way the lion's belly line curves with weight. The slight deepening around the eye that makes it look like it's holding pain as well as power. It lands differently now. Earlier, you saw danger framed into spectacle. Now you see something subtler. The lion is not only wildness. It is effort. It is endurance. It is the body continuing forward even when the moment is impossible. And your tired mind recognizes that with a quiet ache. You keep walking. Another panel shows a lion twisting, and you notice the posture, the way the spine curves, the way the legs brace. It looks less like a symbol and more like an animal trying to survive. The palace still wants you to feel control, yes, but the carver allowed truth to leak into the stone. Lions suffer. Lions resist. Lions are not props. They are living weight, translated into relief. Your gaze travels along the sequence, and you begin to see the courtyard as more than a dramatic gallery. It is a loop of story designed to be revisited. Designed to reveal different things each time, depending on who is looking and how tired they are. You think about your own days, how you revisit the same worries, the same routines, and they look different depending on your exhaustion level. Nineveh, in its own way, understands that too. It carved rewatch value into stone. You drift toward the center of the courtyard and look up. The sky is darker now, the stars faint but present, and the open rectangle feels like a calm window cut into the palace's seriousness. Your breath slows. You let your shoulders soften again. The courtyard's openness gives your mind space to stretch out and stop clenching. And that's when you remember the token. Not in panic, because you already retrieved it, but in context. You remember how it slipped away near a jutted corner in the repeating corridors. You remember how you crouched in lamplight and found it near the stone edge. You remember how that moment taught you attention. And now, standing in the lion hunt courtyard again, you realize you can use this space as a calibration point. A landmark. A reset. If you can locate which corridor from the courtyard leads toward that jutted corner, then you can locate the corridor system more reliably. You can map the palace not in abstract, but in lived paths, courtyard to workrooms, courtyard to kitchens, courtyard to terrace wind. And yes, courtyard to the place where small things fall and get lost. So you begin to look for clues in the courtyard itself. Not only in the relief content, but in how the walls are arranged, how doorways are framed, how motifs cluster near openings. You walk along the wall, scanning each doorway with the calm focus you learned in the maze. Some openings are framed with heavier borders, more formal, leading likely to official interiors. Others feel lighter, bordered by motifs that suggest movement and passage. You find one doorway where the relief border has that reverse braid you noticed earlier, a subtle twist that became a breadcrumb in your mind. It sits near the doorway like a quiet label. Another doorway is framed by repeated rosettes, tight and thick, a threshold marker that makes your body instinctively slow. Another doorway has reliefs that feel more domestic, less dense, more breathable, perhaps leading toward kitchens or garden pockets. You test your memory against the cues. The jutted corner where the token fell, you remember it felt more formal, more dense, more official. It wasn't near bread smells. It wasn't near herbs. It was in the palace's serious mood. That suggests a doorway framed with heavier motifs, not the lighter ones. You approach the doorway with thicker borders, where the reliefs look more contained. You stand just inside it for a moment, letting your eyes adjust. The air here is cooler and stiller. The sound is more echo than murmur. It feels like the palace's inner gravity again. You don't go far, just enough to see the first panels inside. And then you notice it, a small, recurring symbol near the doorway's inner edge, the same one you had started treating as a landmark, an emblem-like shape that appears near key junctions. It sits here like punctuation, as if saying, important route. Your mind makes a quiet connection. That symbol appeared near the breathing pocket you retraced through. It appeared near a fork that confused you. If it appears here, near this doorway from the courtyard, then this doorway likely leads into that same network of corridors. That means, this is the route that connects your calm courtyard to the labyrinth where small things can slip away. It's not a dramatic clue. It's not a hidden trapdoor. It's just a pattern becoming legible. But that's exactly what makes it satisfying. The palace is not a mystery novel that needs a shocking twist. It's a maze that rewards quiet attention. You step back into the courtyard and look again at the reliefs around the doorway. Now you notice how the figures in nearby panels lean subtly toward this opening, as if the story flow is pointing into it. You hadn't seen that before because your eyes were busy with lions. Now you see the palace's larger choreography. Lions on the walls, yes, but also bodies and patterns guiding human movement through space. You walk the courtyard perimeter once more, checking the other doorways, comparing their framing. The lighter doorway with breathable motifs feels like the path toward gardens and kitchens. The doorway near repeated rosettes feels like a ceremonial threshold. The heavier doorway with the emblem feels like the serious interior route, the one you need to understand if you don't want to drift into confusion again. You feel a quiet satisfaction settle into you, the kind that doesn't wake you up but steadies you. You are building a mental map, not with coordinates, but with sensations and symbols. Lion courtyard as anchor, emblem doorway to serious corridors, river wind route for orientation, bread and herbs for comfort. And then you notice another detail in the lion hunt reliefs that makes you pause. A small carved element near the bottom edge of a panel, something you ignored earlier as background, looks like a subtle representation of a boundary, a line of stones, a stylized ground edge, a containment. It mirrors the way the courtyard itself contains the hunt. It's like the carver is whispering the same lesson twice. Everything here is framed. Danger framed. Movement framed. Even your wandering framed, if you learn how to see. You let that sink in. You let your eyelids grow heavier for a moment. You feel the courtyard's open sky above, the stone walls around, the lamplight flickering, the lions forever mid-motion. Then you turn your body toward the doorway with the emblem, the one that feels like a reliable route into the interior. You don't rush. You don't brace for confusion. You simply prepare to re-enter the maze with a better sense of structure, and with the calm confidence that if the palace tries to turn you around again, you now have an anchor to return to. You step toward the threshold, carrying the courtyard's breath inside you, ready for the next gentle unraveling of Nineveh's stone logic. You step through the emblem-marked doorway, and it feels like sliding back into a familiar current, cooler air, steadier echoes, reliefs arranged with formal density. But you're not entering as someone half-lost anymore. You're entering as someone who knows what to watch for. The difference is subtle and huge. It's the difference between being carried and walking alongside the current without being dragged. The reliefs greet you with their quiet instructions. Borders thicken near turns. Figures lean toward openings. The emblem repeats at a respectful distance, like a sign you can trust. You follow the visual logic the way you follow breath and meditation, steady, patient, responsive. And because you're calmer, the palace becomes easier to move through, as if stone itself prefers guests who don't panic. Your fingers brush the fold where your token rests, and you feel its presence again. Solid. Secure. Humble. The palace's small permission pressed into your side like a promise. You don't cling to it as a talisman, but you respect it now, the way you respect a key after you've once lost it. You check it once more, not in fear, but in gratitude, and then you let your hand drop. As you move deeper into the corridor network, you sense the watchful rhythm of the night keepers again. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just the soft shifting of bodies in the periphery, the gentle choreography of people who know these passages the way you know the route from your bed to the kitchen in the dark. They don't step into your path. They don't confront. They simply occupy thresholds with a calm that makes the space feel managed. You pass one such threshold, and the reliefs near it grow more formal. The border doubles. The motif clusters. Your body instinctively slows. You don't stop, but you shift into a more respectful pace, like you're walking past something that deserves a quieter step. This is how the palace teaches etiquette without words. It makes your body respond to patterns the way it responds to tone. And then, gently, you feel the token matter. Not because anyone demands it, not because there's a guard holding out a hand, not because the story turns into a confrontation. It matters in the softer way. The way the space seems to open when you move confidently, the way your route feels smoother, the way the watchful presences don't need to recalibrate around you. It's as if the palace senses the token's quiet authority and relaxes its subtle resistance. You drift through a passage where, earlier, you might have hesitated. Now you don't. The relief sequence is clear. The procession leans toward a right turn. The border thickens near the right edge. The emblem appears, small but certain, near the threshold. You turn right, and your feet don't stumble in their decision. They commit. The palace's corridors begin to feel less like a maze and more like a system. That shift is almost embarrassingly comforting. You realize how much anxiety comes not from complexity itself, but from feeling excluded from the logic. Once you can read the logic, the complexity becomes manageable, even soothing. Like a patterned rug, intricate, yes, but not hostile. You pass a junction where light spreads slightly wider, and you feel a faint warmth of human activity nearby, something soft, like someone adjusting a lamp or setting down a tool. You don't see anyone clearly, but you sense movement. The palace is never empty. It's simply quiet in its busier parts, as if people here understand the sacredness of nighttime. Even their work seems to lower its voice. A small breeze slips through a higher opening, cooler than before. It carries a faint scent of outside air, dust cooled by night, maybe a hint of river dampness. You tilt your head and realize you're moving upward, not just physically, but architecturally, toward terraces, higher corridors, places where the palace meets wind and sky. The reliefs shift as you climb. The panels become slightly less dense, the motifs spaced farther apart, as if the walls have more room to breathe. Lamp niches appear at a different rhythm, higher, perhaps, or more frequent where corners tighten. The light becomes a little clearer, less trapped in enclosed corridors. You feel your chest expand without thinking about it. And here, in this upward drift, the quiet resolution deepens. It isn't only that you recovered the token. It's that you recovered something else, your trust in your own steadiness. The palace tested you with repetition and uncertainty, and you didn't collapse into panic. You paused. You retraced. You learned. You moved forward again. That's a kind of competence that doesn't show up on resumes and doesn't get applause, but it changes your life anyway. Your modern day has likely been full of little crises, real or manufactured, each one demanding immediate reaction, each one trying to pull you into urgency. Here, Nineveh has given you a different rhythm, slow attention, gentle correction, calm movement through complexity. The token was a small problem, but it was a perfect one. Small enough to solve without drama. Meaningful enough to shift you. You reach a corridor that runs along a higher wall, and the air feels cooler again. The river wind is faint but present, as if it's waiting for you up ahead. The corridor opens into a terrace-like space, and for a moment you stand near the edge and feel the outside night press against you. The city's distant lamplights scatter across darkness below, small and steady. Your eyes soften. Your body feels heavy in that pleasant way, like a blanket settling over your bones. In the terrace space, you notice the palace's surfaces change. The stone here is more exposed to air, and it feels slightly rougher, less polished by constant indoor use. The reliefs along this stretch are simpler, still meaningful, still carved with care, but less dense with narrative. The palace is not performing here. It's breathing. You let your fingers hover near the wall again, not touching, just close enough to feel the cold radiating. You think about the people who carved these surfaces, the people who maintained them, the people who carried lamps up these corridors, the people who walked these terraces at night when the city slept. You think about how they, too, must have felt the relief of wind against their faces, the quiet comfort of seeing lamplights below, and knowing the world was held by routine. A small callback rises in you, gentle and almost funny, bread steam and garden shade. You can still remember it, even here, high and cool. And now you add another, terrace wind and scattered lights. You're collecting sensory anchors like charms against future stress. You turn back toward the corridor and continue climbing. The palace leads you toward a higher vantage, a roofline or upper walkway where the city will show itself in a wider frame. You can feel it coming in the way the air grows freer, in the way the space around you opens, in the way your footsteps echo less like you're inside a throat and more like you're moving along the ribs of something enormous. You pass one last threshold marker, thick border, clustered motif, a slight narrowing, and then the corridor releases you again into openness. Not a courtyard this time, but a higher place. You pause, and the night seems to expand around you, as if Nineveh is finally willing to show you its full outline, not just the carved stories on its walls, but the way its walls, gates, gardens, and palaces stitch together into a living pattern. And you step forward, carrying your token, your calm, and your quiet gratitude for a city that taught you how to move without breaking. The higher place doesn't greet you with fanfare. It simply exists, as if Nineveh has always been waiting for you to arrive at this angle. You step out onto an upper walkway, part terrace, part roofline route, where the palace's stone meets open air with fewer intermediaries. The night touches your face immediately. The river wind is clearer here, cooler and cleaner, as if it has been rinsed over water before reaching you. You pause, because your body understands that this is a moment you shouldn't sprint through. The city below is not a thing to take in quickly. It's a thing to let arrive slowly, the way sleep arrives when you stop chasing it. From up here, Nineveh doesn't look like a maze. It looks like a woven pattern. Walls and streets stitched together in long, deliberate lines. Courtyards open like dark rectangles within the larger shape, some faintly lit by lamps, others swallowed by shadow. Roofs cluster in uneven patches, their forms softened by darkness. And beyond it all, the river's presence is there, a darker band, a subtle sheen where moonlight or starlight catches a moving surface. You don't see every detail, but you feel the river the way you feel a heartbeat you don't have to control. The wingbolt gates are not fully visible from here, not in close detail, but you can sense where they sit in the city's anatomy, like joints in a body, like strong points where movement funnels and meaning concentrates. You remember standing beneath the Lamasse's shadow earlier, feeling small and placed. Now, from above, you understand the gates roll differently. It isn't just an entrance. It's a statement embedded in the city's skeleton. A place where the city says, in stone, "This is where you become part of my story." You breathe in and let the cool air fill your lungs. You breathe out, and your breath feels heavier, slower. The wind moves around the stone edges with a soft, constant hiss, like the city itself is whispering. It reminds you of the sibilant sound of sand moving, of leaves rustling, of water brushing against reeds. A quiet background noise that steadies rather than startles. From this height, you can trace the palace's internal logic in a way you couldn't while inside it. You can almost see how corridors must run, where courtyards open, how terraces connect. The relief maze that felt so clever and confusing below now reads as a purposeful layout. It's not that the maze is simpler, it's that perspective changes everything. What feels like being lost from inside can look like structure from above. That lands in you with a soft, almost embarrassing truth. So many things in your own life are like this. When you're inside your days, inside your tasks and worries and small humiliations, everything feels like a corridor that might lead nowhere. But when you pull back, when you breathe, when you get even one step of distance, patterns appear. The chaos turns into something more like a system. Not always a kind system, but at least a legible one. You lean slightly toward the edge, not dangerously, just enough to let the view sharpen. You see pockets of greenery, gardens tucked inside walls, dark shapes of trees or shrubs, places that hold moisture and shade. You remember the garden pocket you stood in earlier, the herb scent, the soft water sound. From above, it looks like a small, calm stain of life pressed into stone, like someone insisted on softness inside power. And then you see the courtyards, larger voids, breathing spaces. You know which one is the lion hunt courtyard even without precise detail, because you can feel it in your memory. Open sky, flickering lamps, carved fur turning alive in shadow. From up here, that courtyard is a dark rectangle, a quiet window cut into the palace. It's strange how something that felt dramatic from inside now looks like stillness from above. The hunt is frozen in relief, yes, but the courtyard's shape is pure calm geometry. Your mind drifts to the token at your side, and you give it a light check, not because you fear losing it again, but because it has become a symbolic habit. It's your reminder that small things matter, that attention protects you, that calm is not weakness. You feel the token's steady presence, and let your hand drop again. The city's lamplights below scatter like fireflies. Some are clustered near kitchens and work areas, where people still move softly in the night. Some mark corridors and thresholds, like a string of dim stars guiding movement. Others are isolated, single points of light that suggest a solitary watcher or a small task being finished before sleep. The pattern is not random. It's a map of human needs: food, safety, work, rest. You think about the sweepers you sensed earlier, the scribes, the seal makers. From up here, you can't see their faces, can't see their hands. But you can feel their labor as a kind of invisible architecture. Their work is what keeps the lights placed, the corridors clear, the palace functional. The empire's grandeur rests on the quiet competence of people whose names are not carved into lion hunts. And that, too, changes how you see the city. It makes it less like a myth and more like a place where tired bodies lived. The wind shifts, and you draw your arms in slightly. The coolness is sharper here, but it doesn't bite. It feels like a clean cloth on your forehead. You let it wash you. You let your thoughts loosen. You notice how the palace's roofline and upper walls create a subtle boundary between you and the city below. You are still inside Nineveh, still within its walls, but you are also above the daily flow. It's a strangely peaceful place to stand, high enough to see structure, low enough to still hear life. It reminds you that perspective doesn't have to mean disconnection. It can mean understanding. You let your gaze follow the river's line again, and you imagine the way it moves through the night without caring about empires. Water has seen too much to be impressed. It keeps going. It cools air. It feeds gardens. It carries reeds. It makes cities possible and then outlasts them. There's something deeply soothing in that indifference. It's like the river is telling you, your worries feel huge, but they are still just one small boat on a vast current. A soft smile touches your mind, not bright enough to wake you, just warm enough to ease you. You think about your day, the one you left behind when you stepped under the lamassu. You think about the tasks and pressures that stalked you like lions. And you realize that, from this height, those lions feel less immediate. Not because they're gone, but because you've framed them. You've given them walls. You've given them a courtyard. You've given your mind a way to witness without being consumed. You take a slow breath in and out, and the city's night noises seem to quiet even further. The lamps below continue their steady glow. The wind continues its soft hiss. The relief maze below continues to exist, patient and intricate, ready to hold whoever walks it next. You turn your head slightly and catch the faint shape of the palace complex extending in other directions. More walls, more roofs, more hidden courtyards. Nineveh is not one building. It's a network of intentions. And standing here, you can feel the network like a living thing. For a moment, you imagine stepping back down into the corridors, returning to the maze. The thought doesn't scare you anymore. It feels manageable. Because now you carry the map in your mind, the lion hunt courtyard as anchor, the emblem doorway as route, the river wind as orientation, bread steam and garden shade as comfort. You let the view settle into you like a slow, gentle imprint. This is not the kind of moment you want to photograph and rush past. This is the kind of moment you want to remember in your body, so that tomorrow, when your day tries to grab you by the collar, you can recall this roofline wind and these scattered lights and remind yourself, perspective exists. Breath exists. Calm exists. Even inside stone. And when you finally turn away from the edge and begin to move again, you do it slowly, carrying the city's woven pattern behind your eyes, ready to walk toward the gate once more, ready to let Nineveh guide you back out with the same patient grace it used to draw you in. You leave the roofline the way you leave a deep breath, reluctantly, but steadier for having taken it. The terrace wind fades as the corridor draws you back under stone, and the city's wider pattern compresses into the intimacy of passageways again. But now the corridors don't feel like a trap. They feel like ribs, structure that holds something living inside. Your steps are slower than before, not because you're lost, but because you're beginning to say goodbye without rushing the sentiment. Nineveh has done what it came to do. It has rearranged your nervous system with stone and air and light. It has reminded you that attention can be calm. It has taught you that small things matter, and that you can recover from small mistakes without turning them into a personal apocalypse. Your fingers find the token again, briefly, just to acknowledge it. It sits secure where you tucked it, and you feel a faint pulse of gratitude for the simple fact that it's there. It has become one of your anchors, like bread steam and garden shade, like river wind on your face. A humble object that now carries a whole lesson. Permission is not always given loudly. Sometimes it's a quiet agreement between you and the space you're moving through. You follow the reliefs back down, letting their patterns guide you in reverse. It's interesting how the same carvings feel different when you're leaving. Earlier, they pulled you inward. Now they ease you outward, as if the palace knows how to release a guest without making them feel chased. The processions that once felt like, "Come in," now feel like, "This way out." Their bodies leaning toward corridors that lead to wider air and familiar thresholds. The palace's soundscape shifts as you descend. You catch faint traces of human activity again, some last night tasks, the soft rustle of someone setting something down, the distant brush of sweeping. Even at this hour, the palace is supported by quiet motion. You don't see the workers clearly, but you feel them, like the steady background hum of a city refusing to collapse into chaos. It makes you think, again, of the labor you rarely notice in your own life, people cleaning, organizing, maintaining, making the world usable while you're busy being stressed about it. The thought doesn't guilt you, it softens you. It makes you want to be kinder, slower, more aware. A faint herb scent appears at a junction, and for a heartbeat your body expects the garden pocket again. You smile inwardly, softly, sleepily, because yes, you can almost taste that moment, leaves casting shadows on stone, water whispering, the sense of being allowed to stop without explanation. The corridor doesn't take you directly there this time, but the scent is enough to call the memory back. Bread steam returns in your mind too, warm and comforting, like a quiet hand on your stomach. You realize how rare it is to let food be just comfort instead of fuel you inhale between tasks. The palace made you remember that basic care is not indulgence. It's structure. You pass another opening where a cooler breeze slides in from outside, and you recognize the river wind again. It brushes your cheek, and the sensation is so familiar now it feels like a friend. The wind has been your compass, your reset button. It has reminded you, again and again, that there is always a larger world beyond your current corridor, even when your mind insists everything is only walls. You let that breeze follow you for a few steps, then it fades as you move deeper under stone. The corridor narrows, and you feel the relief maze repetition return, but it no longer disorients you. It feels like a lullaby you've learned the melody of. Rosettes, braids, borders thickening near turns, the emblem appearing at certain junctions. You read it all with sleepy ease, like you're tracing a familiar route in your own home in the dark. As you descend further, the palace's mood shifts from airy to ceremonial. The reliefs become more dramatic, the borders more formal. You recognize the approach to significant thresholds before you see them. Your pace slows automatically. Your shoulders tuck slightly. It's not fear. It's respect, the kind that comes naturally now. You think about the La Massa gate waiting somewhere ahead, still standing and stepping at once, still watching the world pass through. The thought makes you feel a strange tenderness. Earlier, the gate was intimidating. It felt like a test. Now it feels like a guardian you've gotten to know. Not sentimental, not cuddly, stone is still stone, but familiar in the way a stern old teacher becomes familiar when you realize they were trying to help you learn, not trying to shame you. You pass a corridor where the lion hunt motifs briefly reappear, and you glance without stopping. The lions are still there, frozen in their eternal tension. But you don't feel pulled into their drama the way you did earlier. You've already taken their lesson. You've already framed your own dangers into something you can witness without drowning. The lions remain, and you move on with a quiet nod, like you're leaving a room where you had an important conversation. The palace continues to guide you outward, and you notice how your body carries the night differently now. Your breath is slower, your jaw unclenched, your eyes heavier, but not strained. It's the kind of fatigue that feels earned rather than frantic. You feel, in a small, almost ridiculous way, as if Nineveh has been giving you a long, slow massage using architecture instead of hands. You reach a broader passage where the sound opens up again, more distant echoes, more air. You recognize this as the approach toward the gate's inner throat. The reliefs here become more pronounced, as if the palace wants to remind you of its story one last time before you leave. Borders repeat with steady rhythm. Figures advance in solemn lines. Threshold motifs cluster near openings. It's like the city is tightening the last ribbon on its gift. You walk slowly through this passage, letting the carvings slide past your peripheral vision. You don't try to memorize everything. You don't try to take mental screenshots. You let it be a feeling instead: stone coolness, lamplight flicker, carved motion, quiet control. You let the details settle into your subconscious, where dreams are made of impressions rather than bullet points. The air cools again, and you feel the gates shade ahead. Your body recognizes it immediately: the slight stillness, the way sound muffles, the way light seems to dim for a moment. You step into the threshold space, and the Lamase's presence presses down again, not heavy, not crushing, just immense. You look up, and there it is, the winged bull's calm human face, the layered feathers, the powerful carved body that can stand and step at once. The five-legged trick catches your sleepy mind again, and you feel a quiet amusement. Of course the guardian is both still and moving. Of course the city would choose a symbol that refuses to be only one thing. You pause beneath the lamassu, letting the moment stretch. The gate's shadow feels like a roof over your thoughts. You remember your entry, the first awe, the first nervousness, the first surrender. And you realize you're leaving with something different, not certainty, not conquest, but steadiness. A softer spine, a calmer rhythm. You take one more slow breath, and the Lamasa seems to hold it with you, as if the stone understands that every farewell is also a threshold. Then you begin to move forward again, toward the outside night, carrying Nineveh's carved lessons like a warm, silent bundle against your side. You step beneath the Lamasa one last time, and the gate's shadow feels different now, not like a test, not like a warning, but like the cool underside of a hand that has been steady above you all night. The air here is still, held between outside and inside, and you feel the threshold in your bones, the place where one state becomes another, where your tiredness changes flavor from restless to calm. The Lamasa's face stays calm, as if it has seen every kind of human emotion and decided none of them are worth rushing. The wings stack their feathers in patient layers. The carved muscles remain forever poised, forever both standing and stepping. You let your eyes travel along the stone again, not trying to decode meaning, just letting the presence sink into you. It's strange how familiarity softens even the grandest things. Tonight you met a winged bull and lived to tell the tale, quietly, without drama, just by breathing and walking. You move forward, and the palace behind you doesn't slam shut. It simply recedes. The relief bands along the passage walls slide past your peripheral vision like slow film, their patterns becoming less insistent as you approach the outside air. You can feel the city loosening its hold, not because it's dismissing you, but because it knows you've taken what you needed. The maze doesn't need to keep you. It only needed to teach you how to move. Outside the gate, the night is thinner than it was when you arrived. The air carries a faint hint of dawn, not light yet, not color, but that subtle shift in temperature and smell, the way the world begins to prepare itself for morning before your eyes can prove it. The river wind feels cooler, cleaner, less perfumed by smoke. It brushes your face like a quiet goodbye. You take a few steps away from the gate and then pause, because leaving is always a little ridiculous. You can walk out of a city, but you can't walk out of what it put inside you. Nineveh has rearranged your internal space. It has given your mind a new set of anchors, bred steam and garden shade, the calm competence of sweepers and scribes, the terrace wind and scattered lamplights, the reliefs that became a map when you stopped demanding instant certainty. Your fingers brush the token at your side, one last check, more affectionate than practical now. It's there. It's safe. It feels less like permission and more like a reminder. Attention protects you, and calm is a skill you can practice. You don't need to live in constant hunt mode. You can frame your fears. You can give them courtyards. You can let them exist without letting them chase you all night. You begin walking again, away from the lamassu, and the city's sounds shift behind you. The palace echoes fade into a softer murmur. The distant oil lamps become less like stars and more like small, private fires. The city's shape, so clear from the roofline, becomes hidden again as walls and streets fold into darkness. Nineveh does not beg you to stay. It remains dignified, like someone who knows you'll remember them without being asked. You pass the outer streets you walked earlier, now quieter, the life tucked deeper into homes and sheltered spaces. The smells are subtler, cool dash, faint herbs, the lingering sweetness of dates. The ground under your feet feels slightly softer than palace stone. Your steps feel heavier but calmer, like your body is carrying sleep instead of fighting it. And in your mind, the lion hunt courtyard flickers one last time, carved fur turning alive in lamp shadow, motion frozen and yet somehow breathing. But the lions don't feel like danger now. They feel like a lesson you've already integrated. Strength doesn't have to be loud, and fear doesn't have to be a chase. Sometimes the bravest thing is simply to witness, to learn, and then to leave. The sky ahead is still dark, but it's beginning to pale at the edges, barely, like a brush of diluted ink on the horizon. You imagine the first thin light touching the city's walls, turning stone from black to blue to dust gold. You imagine the lamassa catching dawn on its wings, feathers carved into permanence, still standing, still stepping, still watching travelers arrive with tired eyes. You keep walking, and the city falls behind you in layers, first the palace, then the inner streets, then the outer walls, then the very sense of being held by stone. What remains is the rhythm Nineveh gave you. Slow breath. Soft attention. The quiet knowledge that you can move through complexity without breaking yourself. And when you finally let your shoulders drop again, when you finally feel your eyelids grow heavier in that honest, inevitable way, you understand the real gift of this night. You didn't conquer a maze. You let a maze teach you how to be gentle with your own mind. The night can let go of you now. You don't have to grip the story. You don't have to keep replaying every corridor and every carved border like a checklist. Just let the images drift the way they want to drift. Let the winged bulls become silhouettes. Let the relief maze soften into pattern. Let the lion hunt stones slow down until it's only a quiet pulse in the background of your thoughts. Breathe in slowly, as if the river wind is still brushing your face, cool and clean. Breathe out, as if you're releasing the last tight knot you carried all day, one you didn't even realize was there until it finally loosens. Your body knows what to do when you stop interrupting it. Your shoulders settle. Your jaw unclenches. Your hands become heavier, warmer, calmer. If your mind tries to wander back into worry, that's fine. Don't wrestle it. Just notice it the way you notice the reliefs, gently, without panic. You can frame the worry the way Nineveh framed its lions. Give it a courtyard. Give it walls. Let it pace inside them, and then let it tire itself out. Imagine the garden shade again, leaves moving softly, water whispering, the scent of herbs hanging in the air like a promise that care exists. Imagine bread steam rising in the dark, warm and ordinary and safe. Imagine the terrace lights scattered below you like small stars, steady and patient, reminding you that life continues quietly even when you stop pushing. Now let the city fade. Let the La Masa stand far behind you, still watching, still calm. Let your token rest where it belongs, not as a burden, but as a quiet reassurance. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to be tired. You're allowed to stop solving everything tonight. Your breathing slows. Your eyelids grow heavier. The edges of the world blur just a little, the way they're supposed to when sleep approaches. And in that soft blur, you can finally feel it, the calm, gentle certainty that you don't need to survive the night by fighting it. You can simply drift. End of story. Sweet dreams.